Welcome to HOPS, everybody. This is
Hello.
a history podcast.
About CGI, archivization, and other things.
So we're both Houdini artists. Paweł works on something that works a little bit different than me.
Yeah, I'm more like developer, but I used to be an artist. Anyhow, I do things with Houdini as well, or Python, depending on the day.
I'm a visual effects artist in Toronto, Canada. I've been in the industry for close to 5 years now.
So I'm Paweł, work as usually as pipeline TD or technical artist when I work on games. I work, I live in Montreal right now. I do general VFX game advertisement stuff for 10 years.
It's not just about Houdini. This kind of podcast is going to be about a lot of different things. We're going to go through the history of CGI graphics, both in Canada, and Paweł has some awesome kind of facts about other countries as well, including Poland. So we're not just going to talk about Canada and all the cool stuff that's happened here, but hopefully the whole visual effects kind of industry as a whole as we progress through these episodes. Today we're going to cover something a little bit different. I think we're going to talk about, well, really one of the founding fathers of computer graphics.
And when we talk about father of the graphics, how far are we going? Because from what I remember, one of the first computer in, I believe it was 1950s, early 1950s, less 1950s, England, not England, in UK. I don't remember which part of UK it was. Probably was England, but it could be Scotland as well, or Wales. Created one of their computer. One of the things that they did, they display vector graphics, and I believe the source that I was reading it about, it was the first time when ever graphic was displayed on a digital screen.
Really? Okay. I'm gonna have to look that up because the content I wanted to share today was kind of started in the 1960s and 70s. So I guess that predates it by 20 years or 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, but I don't think there was raster graphics. So we have vector and raster monitors. Yeah. And then you can argue that like electrical potential, like when you have the things to display like the electricity or power of energy is 1D because it's constant stream and you just see history of it and the value up and down. Mm-hmm. So that's, you can say that's also like oscillator. Yeah, oscillator is 1D monitor.
I guess that's like, oh right, yeah, there would have been easy oscillated graphics. Ooh. Okay, I'm gonna have to look into that. That might be something else if we're gonna get into analog, like film to analog graphics and like film to video graphics is a whole other story in visual effects, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you go with ray tracing, the first use of ray tracing that was recorded in history was in 15th or 16th century for painting. Yeah, and a reference to that is in paper from Pixar about ray tracing in the first implementation of ray tracing, like ray tracing as PBR ray tracing. Mm-hmm. For Renderman. I think it was the paper from 2011 or 2012. It was for Monster University, I believe. Maybe it was other paper, but that's what I remember.
One really cool part about computer graphics that I've been researching lately has been like the overlap of music, EDM, and computer graphics, because EDM came out of computer graphics development actually in Canada, and it's really kind of cool. So hopefully we can show a video today, or I can show the video of like one of the first EDM computers that's ever existed. So I just learned the other day that actually Greg Hermovac did like a DJ set with Touch Designer at Xagoraris in 2007.
All right, didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. I kind of wish I was in computer graphics in 2007 now. Based on the cool stuff that we're hopefully going to show today, it's like at the University of Toronto, it was just like the place to be if you just wanted to operate a computer, which is kind of crazy. And some of the early form computers was actually in Saskatchewan as well. I think they actually had the first computers in Canada.
So I'm just wondering, because Canada would be in this very weird intersection of computer. Until the 1960s, UK still have more or less working computer industry, and then you have states on the south, and then you have east thing that they was trying to do in the things on the west. I was wondering if the computers that will be working on in this like very early days would be the one from UK or one from States.
They actually built their own.
Hey, that sounds about right. Now I
Mhm.
just will need to dive later in very nerdy historical tracker in of what architecture they use. There was slightly different ideas how to create computers at the time. I mean, as it's now, but then it was more visible because it was more separated. Like the distance was more separating because information couldn't travel that fast. It was only land phones, no internet. Even translating was bigger issue than now. Like it would be very hard to translate. Well, I mean, like in Canada at least there is French, but like for example from like early Russian mathematics stuff that was as important for information technology. Yeah, I'll dive into that later.
Well, no, let's go into this a little bit more because I think this might actually fit in with the topics that we want to talk about today, and also with Ronald Baker as well. And the cool thing is that when you were like talking there, I was pulling up my document on that topic, and this computer is from 1957. And you said something earlier today about it, like stuff going on in the 1950s in England with computers.
Yeah, I think that was technically the first computer, according to the book that I was reading, was the first computer that ever displayed anything.
Let's take a look at this. Cool. So this is something I found from the University of Toronto. Not Toronto, Saskatchewan. So yeah, their first digital computer screen on campus was from 1957.
LGP30. Okay, I will just type it out.
Oh yeah. Any cool things to bring that up? Because like, look, it's just literally like a drawing stand, like a whiteboard.
Question now. So it didn't have display then. So that was not the first computer that they used to do graphics, or are they drawing on the paper?
Let's see. Okay, let's read this. It was jointly owned by the University of Saskatchewan Research Council, the National Research Council Prairie Regional Laboratory, and the university. Mostly used in 3 organizations at the university mathematics department. It had only 15 flip-flop elements, predated transistor usage in digital computers, and was built from vacuum tubes. So I presume those are the vacuum.
And it was based on the ENIAC. So not the ENIAC was the one that was developed in the University of Pennsylvania and was used in during Project Manhattan. And I think it was the computer for which Grace Hopper created first linker.
Okay, like yeah, I guess this would be after that because it says it was in 1996 with a price tag of $47,000.
That's even weirder. It is created by Royal Typewriter Company, and where you would think that this company would be headquartered based on the name.
Royal, the typewriter company. England.
It was based in New York City with factory in Hartford, Connecticut, and it was founded in 1904. That's a very interesting name for American company. Royal Typewriter Company. I was thinking that it would be Canadian or British with this name. Well, eventually Dutch, but
they were paying IBM $11,000 per month to keep it running.
Oh, but that was the same machine, or
yeah,
IBM. So it was IBM 1620. Okay, yeah, that sounds about right. I don't know the history about early monitors, but I wonder if those monitors was raster or was it still vector ones? I don't remember where the transition was.
So there's also the IBM 740.
Oh yeah.
And this was like, I guess, more of a punch card machine where there's like a line printer.
That's other way around. So basically mainframe, they are still used in like banks and other things. But it's imagine a render farm, but it's not dozens, hundreds, thousands of computers. It's just one computer that's just so huge and have just so many CPUs or whatever, and all work as a one unit. Everyone just connects to the same system, and basically that's two systems that we work on come from. So Mac OS, which is based on Berkeley Unix, but Unix, the system that was before for the mainframe, made so everyone can connect.
I remember reading a story where like the first woman, the first person to really take home a personal computer, I think she was working for IBM at the time, and so she had the first really personal computer because when she was working at IBM, she had to go back to her parents. She was living with her parents, and she couldn't really afford to commute back and forth to the office.
Oh yes, I remember that. I was reading. It was not. Yeah, you can say that. It was not mainframe. It was a little bit smaller, but it was like one of the first one that you can fit. Exactly like that.
Yeah, so they like shipped it to her house, and apparently her dad would like proudly walk around the neighborhood saying, "We have the first person. My daughter has the first personal computer." There's actually a really good documentary on her, actually, or a good Vice article.
That's possible. I remember listening that on podcast called Command Line Heroes. There was like entire episode about her, but I cannot find it because it have few hundred episodes. Yeah, there was this company that started making first computer, and I think Grace Hopper was working there, and then just after the war, she was working on the thing that she was good at, and then was bought by some men, and they push her away, and then she get depressed and had started to have problem with substance abuse, and yeah, it's not fun story.
There were computers in Saskatchewan. So these are some of like the first computers ever used in really the development of computers, let alone computer graphics in Canada. The Department of Electrical and Engineering needed a college assessment of academic computing needs, and they needed something better than the HP 2000. I think that's the name of a printer nowadays, but that definitely was a computer name back then. The first computers ever developed in Canada were in the 1940s as a military-sponsored research project. And they actually began at the University of Toronto in 1946.
Yeah, but I was just wondering about the branch of the army. Was it artillery or was it for breaking codes?
It could have been for intelligence because it was the 1940s. It was in the midst of World War II. But it would also take until 1952 to actually get the computer to be operational. So it skipped the war effort anyway. So it was apparently gave U of T one of the first statuses in the world to, or first organization as one of the first organizations to ever own a computer. But it kind of backfired in a way because even though they started the project in 1946, they kind of were slower than the National Research Council would have liked. And they were forced to obtain high speed. They needed more funding, essentially. They were kind of aiming to try and make high speed computing power for the entire country happen. Well, the National Research Council did. They also want to accelerate research at Ontario's Chalk River nuclear reactor. I'm not sure if you've heard of Chalk River. It's only famous because of the nuclear reactor. And I don't even think they do testing there anymore.
But I've never heard about it.
Yeah, it's more of a military village. Yeah.
Okay, most of the things that I know about electricity in Canada is about Quebec and dams.
So they kind of, the National Research Council started to be a little bit of a dick to the U of T. Kind of said to them, "Hey man, So we're pulling all your funding now, and you're not allowed to make computers anymore, and you're not allowed to have access to computers. Basically, kind of just said you need to figure your own computer program out. Flash forward a couple years, and the Dynamics Graphics project would actually kick forward computer research at U of T again. Okay, I guess it was the Navy. I guess it was a branch of the Navy, because now that I look at it. So they were kind of also
Right.
generating an interest in computers.
I mean, it makes sense. It's a lot easier to navigate the submarine in this way.
Yeah. And so they actually started to create domestic electronic industries to sustain their efforts during World War II, because they were actually looking into it then. So that resulted in the creation of the Digital Automated Tracking and Resolving Data system. And it was basically an anti-submarine warfare tool. Yeah. So that was like one of the first electronic builds in Canada. This is the first couple of systems. The Royal Canadian Navy is going around and developing computer systems. They're looking for transformer meter manufacturers. This DATAR system gave way to a different computer system companies, different other computer companies in Canada. It allowed Canada Post to create the world's computerized mail sorting prototype, Air Canada's first computerized airline reservation system. So this DATAR system came from a submarine, just kind of helped launch all of Canada into computers. This is kind of where Saskatchewan would kind of come into play, kind of start building computers to help with the Navy.
You have a lot of the dots, right? Mm-hmm. And you want to make the line that fits the dots. And just a lot of very simple calculation, but they're just very boring to do it by hand. Or when you approximate any kind of differential equation. And the first computer was mostly used for that, for like a lot of repeating calculation. And they would do all of the hard part, like analyzing by hand. Because we often just approximate analysis. They would do analysis by hand, and they would just do approximation part at the end, at the very end.
So in 1963, they also purchased an IBM 1620 machine, and it was installed in their engineering building. So that one definitely wasn't for crops. It basically was a novelty tool for their engineering, commerce, and mathematic programs until like 1965. So it only really lasted 2 years. They also got another IBM 7040 computer, which was purchased with funding assistance from the National Research Council. And then that kind of continued of purchasing and selling computers until the fall of 1966, where they had an extreme demand for computer resources. And they ended up doing some other things to get by. So they needed a lot more random access memory, or RAM, but they didn't really have computers that had that. And by the summer of 1967, they needed 3 more computers to meet its overall needs. They ended up grabbing something called an IBM 360 Model 50. So I'll try and bring up a visual of that. But basically what these guys were these massive things. So they kind of really look like 2001: A Space Odyssey computers, or something you see as a prop in like.
That's probably right. Like that's probably what how they created props. There was like, hey, I know the guy in the university, and they smuggled somebody to university, and then somebody was working on the props on the movie. Was like, I will just draw something, and then they started working on something like that.
This model will kind of hold the university up in 1970, but by then they started creating something called ARPANET, and ARPANET was an experimental platform upon which digital packet switching communication was developed. So this was basically the first generation of communication protocols for the internet. So yeah, that was all done in Saskatchewan.
I mean, that was done in many universities. Like ARPANET was created as there was just many universities that was doing that. It was one of the first open protocols. But I think most of the work was done in bunch of the university in the US. I'm just saying that as like
Oh, okay.
appendix.
So it was like more than one university. Gotcha.
Yeah, there was many of them.
The University of Saskatchewan would throw this model in the garbage and basically order something called a Hewlett Packard 2000.
HP.
No way.
Yes.
That's where the name comes from?
Yeah, it's Hewlett Packard.
Oh, that makes more sense. Packard. So they would order something called like this.
Yeah, and that's also one of the companies that is responsible for creating anti-union culture in general computing sector.
Really?
Yeah, I think was them and Intel.
Interesting. I didn't know that. So yeah, that was their next acquisition of a computer. Basically, they needed a time-sharing system on campus, which became really, really popular. And so basically, this was a mini computer, mini of terms, and handling up to 16 simultaneous users. Later up to 32, and basically it had a new language called BASIC on it that allowed the quick creation of simple programs to interactive terminals. And then they also began sharing this computer with the University of Regina's campus as well. Basically, what happened next was a little bit of a curveball because the price of computer technology in the 1960s began to attract negative attention from the government because it was so expensive. And the university started to be at risk of losing its funding due to the constant machine upgrades it was doing per year. So they were spending so much money on computers, the government was like, we actually would prefer if you just stopped. Sezzy is screaming. So I'm gonna go grab Sezzy. This is Sezzy. Sezzy, what's your review on Houdini 20? We got
Wait, does it mean that we get another cut? Because we have Houdini 19, so then...
Sezzy Brick, you want to have another kitten? You had like 9 kittens. I got confirmed by the vet that she had 9 kittens.
Okay.
Before I found her. Basically, the Humane Society wasn't like, I guess they just didn't have time or didn't care to pull up her records. When I synced them over to the vet was like, oh, did you know that she had 9 kittens? And I was like, oh, okay. Oh. The next computer we're going to look at is something called the DEC System 2050, which were just these big, long types of tubes. Okay, we're going to have to do this with a cat. And they purchased this system, a DEC 2050. And then it was upgraded to a 2060 model in 1980. And then it supported up to 80 simultaneous users, but it was also overloaded very frequently. This computer that you're seeing on screen had about 36-bit RAM, 450 megabytes of disk storage, and 2 tape drives for user data storage and backup of the system. And you could also code at the time in BASIC, Fortran, COBOL, Snowball, and Lisp.
Okay, Snowball, I never heard about that.
It's
I use Lisp. I know what COBOL is. I know Fortran. I know what is Fortran. I never tried to read that because it's that just language for somebody who spent 30 years on like learning mathematics well enough so they will optimize the linear solver I will use and never want to understand how it works. And BASIC, I heard about it, but I guess like there is like all of the computers that you're talking about, they have one very, very peculiar feature, which is that you have simultaneous users, right?
Yeah.
Which means that they were all Unix based or like Minix based. I think Minix was first, and then there was Unix. I might be wrong. Those names are too similar, but that also like point out to like historical reason why a lot of those Canadian companies ended up using like first IRIX and then Linux. So like Houdini was on Linux from first version or second version. Maya was on IRIX and then on Linux. soft image is more complicated, but before Microsoft bought it, it was working better on Linux. You have all of these things, and then you still the consequence of that and how the companies uh, works. Most of the VFX companies is on Linux and use that share user architecture. Like you have a bunch of the other things, but like you ended have this very dominating two forces, which is one from universities, and then is also the down of the open source with Berkeley and Berkeley license and entire war between them, University of Berkeley and IBM over operating system. Like you have that, and then you have this very personal computer. So you have Apple, which both like Apple have other things. They switch to the OpenBSD later. Like that's one of that ecosystem. This personal computer, and then you have DOS and Windows, and then they just you would have that and as like Amiga, ZX Spectrum, and as that create a lot of graphics in Europe because there was less of this in the university, and that's how a lot of games started being created and then evolved, like the demo scene, the computer graphics, like 3ds Max, other things like that, Photoshop, etc. That's this one part, and then you have these huge universities that have computer power and network connection and multiple users working together. And from that, you have like the preferences that people have, and then you have first computer graphic cards, so from graphics, and they created this. They used this system that was called IRIX, which is also doesn't exist, but it was one of the companies that bought license for the Unix.
So this one cost around $750,000 in 1979.
All right, so we'll be over like 3-4 millions right now.
Pretty much. Now I want to play a video that goes to Toronto, where University of Toronto's graphics department was.
Is that I can control the computer through gadgets like this light pen, with which, for example, I can select the picture I want. Here is a list of the different pictures that have been coded up for the...
There's one funny thing. So this is light pen, right?
Yes.
And you know what it's like when interacting with? The same method that it's how it works, like CRT monitor, because it's like the old televisor. So that it means that the light pen interacts with the electron cannon.
Also, I just realized something looking at the left-hand side. So all of these are pictures.
Yeah, they might be not pictures. They might be just like font.
By selecting that spot on there, the appropriate picture will be chosen. I give it a name on the typewriter. I press this button. There is our grid. Now, if we want to do standard graphic operations and some other things with it, we have a whole menu of different operations available to us. For example, if I want to change the size, I select the size routine, and now conversationally, through a conversation with the computer, I can select the scale factor. I want to make the picture half as big as it was, and I'll put the result in a new place. I'll call that N grid. Notice I'm not using any numbers, binary or otherwise, to do this, and there is a smaller image. I can see the result as I go. I don't have to wait overnight till the result is plotted. Maybe I want to move it. Perhaps I want to move it 5 inches to the right.
Oh no, they use imperial measurement. I don't like it anymore.
I'm just amazed of like how big the computer screen is.
I think it's because there was no technology to minimize the canon and interaction. So it's light pen and light pen. Yeah, I think it works at the same in the same way when you have like Duck Hunt on NES. I think the light pen works in pretty much in the same way. I'm not sure, but I think it is.
More advanced things than the standard translation, rotation, and scaling. For example, there, a line, and demonstrate that we can go from any picture to any other picture. And again, this is animation, 24 frames. It would take up 1 second of time on film. And we will see examples of this later on. From our grid, we create the picture of the girl. The whistle I get from the computer is to tell me that this operation...
I think it would have to be vector-based.
Pose a picture by simply drawing it on the face, like so. We put a little window on our house. It's not going to be much of a house, but...
Yeah, I think the dots are just, I think it's like mix of both of them. So you have I think it's vector.
A distortion of it changing into one of the other images.
Yeah, I guess they're polyline, and because they're polyline, you can just blend them. Just LARP.
And then it goes into all these like different things the computer could do.
Hey, now there is interesting thing. Okay.
They're so proud of this.
I mean, that's impressive because you have the things. You have a fine transformation of entire thing. So that means that there have been some sort of hierarchy, maybe. And then you have the transformation that are no affine. So the when you have the segments moving, right? I mean, they still affine, but they're affine on the segment. So they have to use some sort of algorithm for that.
So apparently this computer program, what we're watching now, was also used to create one of the first animated shorts ever called Hunger at the National Film Board of Canada. So like keep in mind this style because the next video I'm going to show you is Hunger, but you'll notice that it's very, very similar to what you just watched.
I wonder if it's linear curve or is not linear.
So this is a different iteration of the same animation system.
So basically it's like blend shape, right?
Yeah, so it's all line derivative. And basically this was supposed to be hand animated, the original pitch of it, because Peter Foltz wasn't really a big fan of computers. But they needed something, a storyline to just test that this animation system actually.
I wonder how they did that. Actually, like, well, okay, yeah, they could draw it. But then there was blending between it. So either they would have insane amount of point and that would be very computation expensive. So, or they would like have to optimize it by hand. You know how long they work on it, maybe?
I do have notes from it somewhere. I gotta double check. But I think it was definitely took over close to a year to create, actually.
Yeah, I think they probably had to do some like manual things.
So 1973. Budget was $38,000. So it was in collaboration with the National Research Council of Canada. So Nestor Buchnick, had heard an animator from Disney explain the traditional animation process, and he was like, "This is pretty cool." And then he worked as a lead animator on this NRC project where he wrote the computer code that we just saw, and the work of basically seemed to pushed this idea to Burtnick that, computer animation kind of had to exist and it was kind of the future. The National Film Board in Montreal was contacted so artists could work on his project to see if they had a pitch for computer animation. And Folds, who was living in Paris at the time, was contacted first, and Folds' first film was actually using Burtnick's program in 1971, and it was called Metadata. And this was followed by Hunger, which we just saw. Basically, it took over $200,000 equivalent in 2021 to create this movie.
I wonder where his family is. Because that's very characteristic names.
Yeah. Oh, Folds. Yeah.
It sounds like it could be Ukraine, maybe. No, not Peter Folds, Nestor Burtnik. Yeah, I was trying to look at. There is nothing about. There is nothing about his family, so I don't know where he was born, nor where his family is from. But just Nestor and Burtnik. Wait, born in Krakow and migrated to Canada.
Oh, yeah, so Burtnick really was he was a father of computer animation. So yeah, he basically born at Otherburt, Manitoba to Ukrainian immigrants. He became so he was Canada's first major computer graphics guy. Basically, The Hunger was the first animated movie to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Short. And then he actually earned an Academy Award in 1997, but that took a long time to really win.
Marceli Weiss, which is also credited as one of the person that was working as the first in Canada in the graphics, is from Poland. Like, he was born in Poland and then immigrated. And Marceli Vain, sorry. Me neither. I'm very. I never heard about that. Yeah, and also it's another thing I was talking. I'm just looking about Vane. So he was working on transmission of the weather radar maps, which is another thing I was thinking about the crop stuff. Because that was one of the first thing. It was also what was his name? Mandelbrot was working on that. Like, that was one of the things that he was trying to do. Like, there was like bunch of the things because he wanted this weather is chaotic, right? So to simulate weather, you need to have chaotic system. So you need to have a noise. And then Mandelbrot also was working on IBM, and there was like wanted to measure lost packet, but because it's AC and it's not it's hard to predict the curve of AC. So it turns out how many packets you lose in a second. It's a fractal system as well, and then like Vanderbilt was other thing. But basically, that was one of the chaotic system. And it's another connection because I think Mandelbrot was also from Poland. He was born to, I think, Jewish German family that later emigrated to France. But in France, in like French mathematics at the time, they have like very communique sentence. There was like unique things in the French school of mathematic things when they would put all of the mathematical research as one person. There was a lot of communists, and Mandelbrot really didn't like communists. So at some point he moved out to US, and then he was working at IBM, bunch of the things. And he also proved that economics is fractal because he started checking the prices of the local market and on the stock exchange, and turned out that both of them fluctuated in similar ways. So markets are fractal. Like, the difference amount rate of the difference was similar, even though like prices was fluctuating. I think there was no connected to each other, but they fluctuated in like similar manner, which proved that economy is fractal.
Today, computers are of human scale and are easily affordable. Users
have to be ray tracing. There are balls in there.
The computer in turn responds by displaying vivid and meaningful pictures and images.
Yeah, but that's later, right? That's That's like different kind of the monitor. And 3D. There are shadows as well. There is no reflection, so it's not ray tracing. I'm sorry. It's just like I remember like when I was hearing about like old stuff, or like when I was like in some company, the first company I was talking about old stuff, and in all demos, if there was it's small, and if you see reflection, that means it's ray tracing. And if you see all of the books for learning how to code your render engine, like for example, ray tracing in a weekend, it's that. It literally have on the cover balls with reflections. So you know there's ray tracing.
Toronto's Dynamic Graphics project has been developing techniques for creating dynamic computer-generated images and methods of making computers easier for people to use. This program is a snapshot of our research in the field of interactive computer graphics. It also portrays 20 years of the evolution of an exciting and important aspect of computer technology.
So you might notice, so Ronald Baker, he's the director of this. This is the guy who taught Kim and Greg.
Oh yes, that's why I know the name.
Yeah, so this is the guy who made side effects happen. He's the grandfather of side effects, I guess would be the proper term of it all. And he created a company after the Dynamics Graphics project called HRC, HCR, Human Computer Resources. Yeah, so HCR. And in that company, Kim Davidson and Greg Hermovic would get their first jobs in the field of computer graphics. And then from there, they would move on to Omnibus Computer Graphics. From there, they would go on and work in a little office called SESI that they shared with something called Spin Entertainment in Toronto. After grab hold of the name Side Effects Productions, and then they would create Houdini. And that's kind of, I'd say he's the grandfather of it all, because a lot of his theories on the history and also like ideas of how to run computer graphics companies actually still pretty much hold up today. And so a lot of the concepts that Dr. Ronald Baker wrote are very much considered very, very good advice at the least for running a computer graphics company.
Yeah, so that's from the it's like demo reel.
Yeah, pretty much.
The one thing that is very interesting for me, that it's like even from beginning when they started drawing, like doing anything, there was this thought about animation from the start. That's something interesting because you usually start from the still things and then you move to animation. But they thought about the animation from the very start, from what I see.
Yeah, it was. I think the idea was that they wanted to build like computer systems that would help enhance like 2D animation for artists, or at least bring out their creative skills. So the idea for technology, like I think that was being developed here, was just like, how can we enhance the artist? How can we help the artist? And instead of like nowadays where it's like, how can we become the artist with the tools? So
Not really. I mean, most like okay, it's depending for, but like
I guess
at
it's also
least
debatable.
yeah. I mean, like I work on the tools every day, and my goal is usually how to make artists less annoyed with the shit that they have to work on.
Well, yeah, there's like what you do as a TD, where it's like you make tools that help artists, and then we have the whole AI debate right nowadays, where it's like, does AI really help the artist, or is it like more inconvenient? And
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's true.
So I think this is the EDM section. I'm not entirely sure.
William Buxton, a musician and composer, joined...
Hello, I'm William Buxton, and I like a system that's been developed at the University of Toronto. In approaching the system, the composer has three fundamental tasks to perform. The three tasks are composing the score material. The second task involves designing the palette of timbres, or the instruments that the composer will use in the score. And the third task is the performance of the material.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not what I accepted. It's like polka dot space pantonym.
Sir Martin Lamb has adapted and extended this technology to produce, for purposes of music instruction, the Musicland environment, a series of interconnected computer games. One of these is called timbre painting.
Now Jeremy is going to paint the music now. First of all, he's going to dip the cursor, the little crosshairs, into the blue paint pot. Notice how he's now got a blue paintbrush with which he can slap paint all over the music.
Man, like this is very fascinating because
He brushes with the paintbrush will then get orchestrated with a particular timbre. And to
bought this tool, and previous to when he had the scale and he was just drawing it on the computer, both of them are still used. Like this is basically what we still are doing with like Ableton or like any like DAC. I think it's DAC, right?
Yeah.
Anything for music, like you can still do it. And the previous one, I remember using like some synth software, and you still can just basically draw those scale to make the music. It's like something that was years ago, but it's still an option. It's something that's still happening in the user interface of the music software.
Yeah, it's like I remember like programs like this from like the 90s. You remember like there was always like those like kids sites we'd go to in the 90s of like Reader Rabbit games or something like that would have these challenges.
I don't think I remember. Like, I don't think I have internet in the 90s. I think we get internet like early 2000. So yeah, I cannot remember that. But I remember it's from like some Amiga and other stuff. But like still in modern software, you can still use it to do things like that.
Currently, David Blythe, John Kitamura, and Martin Snellgrove of the Department of Electrical Engineering at the University of Toronto are developing a new generation of computer music environment.
The Cadosizer is a high-performance sound computer capable of studio-quality synthesis and effects. John uses a graphical interface provided by a personal computer to interactively configure the attributes
Notes.
or icons on the screen correspond to physical devices.
I mean, this is literally notes. Like, and you still have software like that. Like Bitweek is one, and they have something like that.
Also use computer graphics to assist in changing the parameters of an algorithm, such as the envelope controlling the timbre of the FM sound. So first we'll start with a very slow attack, and now with a much sharper attack. Through the use of interactive computer graphics, the musician can better exploit the flexibility of our programmable synthesizer in a simple and intuitive fashion.
Yeah. So that's the music section. I forget what is next. Oh, I think this is actually the animation section.
Is the sequence as in conventional animation by sketching each individual frame. Notice she draws a squashed ball at the point of contact, a little extra emphasis, at a so-called light button on the screen to call for a real-time playback of the movie she has drawn. Such immediate playback dramatically increases the animator's involvement with her work. We don't have to draw each individual frame. Instead, we can show Genesis how to move a ball by drawing the desired bounce. Lynn has told Genesis to combine the sketch of the ball with the sketch of a bounce to...
Motion clips.
Woo!
Let's look at this technique called the P-curve more closely. Lynn sketches an alternative motion for the ball, which it then carries out. Genesis records not only the path, but the dynamics with which her hand traces it out, and to help her, displays the movement as she draws it. So far, all the animation you have seen has been in apparent 2 dimensions. Now let's add a third, through varying the size of a cell, that is, drawing P-curves which simultaneously expand and contract the horizontal and vertical coordinates of the image. Different P-curves result in different dynamics. In Genesis, unlike in conventional animation, both pictures and motions have truly separate identities. Any movement can be free.
Basically, what is happening, it's they call time third dimension.
Genesis encourages experimentation by making it easy to change any individual part of a movie and thereby to alter the quality of the whole. Back to the present. Robert Burns, Ian Small, and Leonard Slip refined the title animation for this film.
This sequence is working much better since we cut its time in half, or at least, and in talking to the composer, it's made him change his mind about the kind of music theme we're going to use for this opening. He's now, which I think is very fitting with this kind of movement.
Well, it's much more graceful than it used to be. It used to be a little bit more, well, I don't know.
MTV.
Yeah, MTV. Go around in the same curve and move up, so we have a rising curve.
Okay, so that we understand each other, then that original motion...
There is still an enormous gap to be bridged between humans and computers. Unless the systems we build are useful and usable,
I think this was recorded from camera because you have the scan lines.
taken us to develop new technologies for data inputs, such as touch and pressure-sensitive tablets.
With this example, we can demonstrate how the tablet can
Oh, this is Bill Buxton.
pure sound here, pitch going down as I descend, and richness with X, and degree controlling volume. And I can finger paint.
Wait, this is something I think they added to. You have this thing, we just call it Ableton Live.
Yeah, Ableton, yeah.
And I think they added this to the new version, like literally, like almost literally this, like when you can just like scribble on the keypads and we'll just blend it. And then they added it to the like other MIDI keyboard where you were doing that. And there was like pretty big thing, and just like seeing this as like somebody explaining that in 1970s, which is 1975, so it's 50 years ago.
Yeah,
Like sitting and having machine and like saying how it works, being less excited about that at somebody explaining the feature like that to like some new hardware on YouTube in 2022 is very fascinating. Or 2023.
Virtual devices, it's useful to use a physical template laid over top of the tablet. Here I have 5 virtual potentiometers defined by their cutouts as well as a number of buttons. By attaching it to the tablet surface, I now have an operating console for a particular simulation. In this case, it's a small sound synthesizer, which I can turn on an oscillator. I can now adjust its volume and adjust its pitch and its spectral richness. As you can see, the 3 different controls affect three completely different parameters. I can add a second oscillator, raise its volume, change its richness, bring the pitch down, and even add a third oscillator. And I can shut them all off. What we have is an operating console done on a single physical device, which is reconfigurable depending on what template I have.
Like, I don't even know how you'd have the patience to program something like this from the ground up.
Actually no. It's the same how it's kind of similar how you make simulation. You just wait. Which is one of the reasons why I don't do simulation anymore. Well, but you always memorize command. Like you learn how to use notes, how to type comment to the command line, etc. Like it's not something like everything that we use. Like you memorize the street signs. It's all languages, so it's just natural for human to memorize them.
We got into scientific visualizations now.
And I think nerds.
Norman Badler, one of our graduates, now a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, builds models of the human body and of its movement, which are constructed out of spheres. Bubble Man and Bubble Woman have applications in the evaluation of environments, such as airplane cockpits, in robotics, and in choreography and dance.
Ron Unruh and I are going to show you how magnetic resonance images can be used to produce graphical representations of muscle. The specific problem is to detect changes in thigh muscle shape and size due to therapy. We use a magnetic resonance imager to image slices through the thigh, such as the image on the left. Red is muscle, yellow is fat, and black is bone or blood. The images must be corrected to account for variations in sensitivity, and then a threshold can be set which will allow the separation of muscle and fat. Then a contour can automatically be drawn around the muscle and fat.
Yeah, it's cat one, so yeah.
Hey.
Okay, that's just sorting animation. Just thinking about cat graphics, but...
Oh, here's sorting out sorting, which I was trying to show earlier, but...
Performance statistics comparing the three algorithms. The third graph plots how fast they run as a function of the number of items to be sorted. Then, a race in which the three techniques compete on 250 data items each. Our next three techniques sort the data by making successive exchanges of pairs of items. First, the bubble sort, a technique whose fame exceeds its virtues, then the somewhat smarter shaker sort, and finally...
Sorry, but that was very...
Yeah. That was very passive-aggressive. Maybe someone has something against the bubble sort technique.
I mean, like, bubble, like, well, I mean quick sort and team sort. Because one of the algorithms that you learn in the computer science, and I was going through that as well, twice, maybe 3 times. Once in high school, and one was in university. Not sure if I didn't have it on like some other things. It's bubble sort, and you learn how the bubble sort works, which is recursive. And then there was also a little bit salty example about this. This is the recursive, and recursive sucks when you don't have deep stack, which means you don't have that much of the RAM, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess that's and at least you don't have iteration, you just have recursion. I think that might be like some sorry comments about that. But bubble sort is one that you need to learn. It's like first more complex recursive algorithm.
And then via the more dramatic race. Notice the display of each algorithm's running time at the bottom of the screen. Finally, 3 techniques that sort the data by successively looking for and selecting an item that is to go into a particular position. First, straight selection. Then, tree selection, an algorithm which achieves some efficiency by organizing the data into...
It's one of the weirdest things that I did in Houdini for optimization.
Really?
Well, because heap sort, so you have arrays, right?
Mm-hmm.
and you can treat array as tree, and then heap sort and like heaps are great for some stuff. I don't want to go into a lot of details with that, but I basically have like algorithm that I really wanted to optimize, and I was looking into stuff. And if you have complete binary tree, heap sort is most efficient way of searching. And it was when I was like doing recursion and was making them, I have to sort it and make sure that it was a very weird project, and I learned a lot, but as I never use it for anything, and I lost file somewhere.
Professor Alain Fournier is one of the pioneers in producing increasingly realistic three-dimensional computer graphics images. Here's how the method evolved. The first step is depiction in wire frame. Frame with the hidden lines removed. Each polyhedron shaded with a single color. Fourth, the surfaces smoothly shaded. Fifth, so that they take on interesting surface properties. And
Texturing.
Interesting. This is going to be very rudimentary ray tracing.
You guess it. I say we have the ball with reflection. It's ray tracing.
We came full circle.
More balls.
More ray tracing.
Oh!
Wait.
Yeah. It's one of the first images that it's one of the image, like one of images that it's not taken from. One of the first images that is not taken from photos of naked woman was that Mandri.
I'm so happy.
It's one from like there was, I think it was University of Texas or Berkeley.
Interesting. Oh man.
Or Pennsylvania. It was one that released a collection of digital images. Mandri was one of them because it have a lot of colors and a lot of and you have four, so you have like a lot of information. And then there was like other one that it's was shown everywhere, and it's one that is suggested to not be used anymore, which was taken from, I think it was I don't even remember the name of this naked woman taken without her permission, and then they cut off the rest of it, and it was used for like years.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I haven't.
You probably know this image.
Let me Google it on my phone.
I can find it very quickly, but
I don't want to show it on the podcast.
I have found it, obviously.
Oh. Okay.
Yes. What was her name? But it's basically one of the first images that I found on the topic. It's not best quality, but I just send you the image.
Okay. Oh, I think I've seen that one.
Yeah, you've seen it. Like I just have like 100 of example of this image. I just don't remember what's the name of this image, but it's one that it's taken from one of magazines for men.
Okay.
And she's naked if you see the full photo.
Oh. Shit.
And it was taken without her permission, and then was put as like the example image database by university, and was used for like 30 years, I believe.
Oh my god, I would be horrified.
And Mandri's other image from this database.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad the Mandrake took over.
Yeah, fractals. I know this name from.
Yeah, I know this name too. I don't know who it is though. I'll go back to the name. I wish there was a little.
Isn't he?
Let's Google him.
Alain? Yes. Okay, he passed away in 2000. He's inside. Okay, yes. Oh yeah. Okay, so he was born in Lyon, France. He was training in chemistry. Then he emigrated to Montreal. In 1960, he co-wrote a book on chemistry. University of Dallas. Oh, University of Dallas was the other one. Then, no, not Dallas. Okay, Lauren Carpenter. Carpenter was the one of the Pixar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh no, he died of lymphoma in Vancouver.
Yeah, and there was also University of Toronto of Dynamic Photography and University of British Columbia. He contributed to ACM.
Well, this part we might have to cut.
Yes, that's what I was thinking about. Wasn't he about this movie? Because I remember this movie is it used fractals to make the planet, and also it was first time when the volumetric effect was ever used in computer graphics.
Oh wow!
Yes, that's first volumetric rendering in history. Yes, and I read about this in Cars from SIGGRAPH about volumes, about rendering photorealistic volumes, and that's why I remember about that. Oh, wasn't Pixar doing computers at the times too? Hardware as well.
I think so.
It might be that it's like from archive of the hardware stuff, or it's just it's the first 3D animation that won Academy Awards is the one with he will be running and there will be B. You never seen that?
I've never seen WALL-E. No.
Okay. Okay. Now I am.
I know. I feel ashamed too.
No, I don't think you should feel ashamed. It's just like I know that you love history and you know graphics, so I'm just surprised that you didn't see it before.
I don't know. I always think like Pixar has been overstudied or something like that, but so I don't think I bothered looking into it too much. Man, those trees.
Trees in 3D, that's the way to sell the system and sell 3D graphics.
That's true. That's true. I just had tree triggers ever since I worked on something a few years ago because VFX messed up badly on a show.
Yay! Yeah, I know.
5-minute movie called Le Game has recently been completed by the CBC, the National Research Council, and the Dynamic Graphics Project. Live actors were photographed by this robot-controlled camera at the NRC. Using the coordinates of the camera motions tracked and recorded by the robot...
NRC's National Record Company?
National Research Council.
Okay.
The live actors actually been filmed in that environment. The two film sequences were then matted together at the CBC and augmented with an original soundtrack to produce this vivid prototype of how computers can allow actors to appear to exist in worlds that cannot be built.
Wow. Was it before or after Tron? After,
this is 83?
Yeah, so
86? Oh, wait, this! Okay, so Kathleen Richards is actually still alive. So she created this project of hers, was going on that same time as Omnibus. So she works at the University of Ottawa now. And I've talked to her once or twice, and she seems like a really lovely person. But yeah, she was the first woman and the first artist ever in North America to use VR technology. Yeah, so this is VR technology, an early form of it anyways, that she's filming through.
Virtual camera, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's the last 20 years. The story is just beginning.